some self-introduction. And I might add, because I am a small business person, it's not an elevator pitch. And trust me, no one gets into that small moving room to hear you go on about yourself. So this whole idea of an elevator pitch actually it cracks me up and irritates me. But what you want to do is have a comfortable, confident self-introduction that's conversational, not a pitch.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rishi Katz, and welcome to the Oval Table, where we discuss all things related to helping those who live and work within your business how to survive, thrive, avoid pitfalls, have more fun, and become successful faster. Getting advice and input from someone outside of your business can make a big difference, and that's what we seek to do for you each and every week. Here at the Oval Table, we believe that every voice matters, and we want to model how that works. Often the advice that makes the difference comes from where you least expect it. We seek every week to provide a lens for a different way to do business. So much more is possible when everyone's ideas make it to the table. Let me introduce you to our co-hosts, Vaughn Johnson, Doug Bowers, and Carl Walsh.
We have with us today Susan Rowan, and because we identify as shy or introverted, 90% of adults find a room full or Zoom full of strangers to be daunting. If you've ever felt that way, you are not alone. That's one reason that Susan Rowan's classic bestseller, How to Work a Room, has sold over 1.2 million copies in 14 countries. And What Do I Say Next was also a bestseller. Named by Forbes.com as one of the networking gurus, Susan is an in-demand and virtual international keynote speaker who has shared her message of connecting and communicating with audiences worldwide and has been featured in New York Times, The Guardian. She's been on CNN, the BBC, the Chicago Tribune, and Wall Street Journal, just to name a few. And today she's now on the Oval Table. Susan was quoted by Sir Richard Branson in his 10 quotes to mark things happen as his number 6. Her clients include Coca-Cola, the U.S. Air Force, United Health Group, Yale University, Apple Computer, Kraft Foods, Intel, Stanford University, LinkedIn, the National Football League, and her personal favorite, Hershey chocolate. Please join me in welcoming to our table today our guest, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and the mingling maven, Susan Rowan.
Thank you, Carl.
For our listeners, some of whom may not know who you are, as I mentioned in the introduction, you literally wrote the book on how to work a room. And so as our listeners are small business owner operators, this is important. They need to be able to get their message out. They need to get in with the business community and, more importantly, the customer community. How do they start, Susan? How do they start?
Well, the first thing is when invitations come, I always say across the transom, they might come through the internet. They might even show up in a mailbox. They might even show up on your phone. When invitations come for you to appear, the first thing you do is look at your calendar. Look at that date, and then if you're available, RSVP and say yes. Because you want to be, and I'm sorry, but I am a Hamilton fan, and this is my favorite song. You want to be in the room or Zoom where it's happening. But if you say, I can't do this and I got something else, this is the worst. Or maybe something better will come along, then you're not there. The serendipity, the incidental, the coincidental of what happens on a Zoom, in a room, you have no access to.
But as we allude to, most people tend to be shy in the beginning. They're a little reluctant or maybe even afraid of it. How do they get past that? How do they break through that?
I could say the first thing you do is buy my book, but let me give you the tips. You're not alone. Whatever room or Zoom you're in, 90% of the people feel the same way you do. And now that we've been 22 months, at least in my part of the world, not in rooms or in with very small groups, going into a larger group, most of us feel rusty. They've been writing about that for the last 6 months. We've lost some of our social skills. We've lost some of our confidence. Should we shake hands? How close do we get? There's so many conflicting issues. I know this is going to sound very awkward, but preparing makes us feel comfortable and confident. So I always tell people, hey, first thing you prepare is what you're going to say about yourself. Have your own self-introduction. And I might add, because I am a small business person, it's not an elevator pitch.
Mm.
And trust me, no one gets into that small moving room to hear you go on about yourself. This whole idea of an elevator pitch actually, it cracks me up and irritates me. But what you want to do is have a comfortable, confident self-introduction that's conversational, not a pitch. The 3 components, and I want all of our listeners, if you have paper and pencil or your phone near you, I want you to write it down, because this is going to be very different than what you've heard other people say. When you are on a Zoom in a room, I know I hear people at my breakfast club give their definitive pitch. That's fine if that's what you do. But when you're walking into a group or you go in a Zoom where you maybe don't know people, you have to know what you want to say about yourself. It starts with point 1. It's 7 to 9 seconds. Unless they tell you you have a minute. Now, this is about social skills. So it's a pleasantry. It's 7 to 9 seconds. Second thing is, it's keyed to the event or the purpose of the event that you're at. When I go to my friend's kid's 10th birthday party, is going to be very different than when I show up at the fundraiser for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and very different from the fundraiser where there are people in the room who are going to do business with me as a speaker, or might want to hire me to consult with them on their book writing, etc. So key your self-introduction to where you are, because it helps other people figure out what to say to you. It gives them context for why you're there. Otherwise, people don't know. And we have to be as helpful as we can so people, and get this, feel comfortable with us. So for everyone that's shy and calls themselves an introvert, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to ask you to take the focus off yourself, and this will help you overcome those pains and the butterflies in the stomach. Focus on what can you do to make other people feel comfortable with you. That takes the pressure off, and then you can be the host that we were all taught to be growing up, and extend yourself. And once that other person or all those people are comfortable with you, conversation ensues. So we have 7 to 9 seconds, key it to the event. And the third one I learned from 2 people, Dr. Adele Sheely, who was the founder of the Career Center at Cal Northridge and author of Skills for Success on the shelves for 40 years. And she said, everywhere you go, instead of acting like a guest, feed me, bringing a drink, introduce me around, always act like a host. Always be the person who extends, who welcomes, who introduces yourself to people, who starts the conversation. Some people say that, oh, when you leave to get a drink, bring other people drinks. Well, that gets a lot of complication. But you know what the host is. The host is the person who makes us feel welcome and comfortable, and will introduce us to a couple people in a way that makes people want to talk to us. So when we are the host, if we introduce people with that kernel of information that would be of interest to both, but with the tone of enthusiasm for the person, people want to talk to them. And then the second part of that is that Patricia Fripp said, when you introduce yourself, please don't give your title. Number one, titles mean different things in different businesses. And she said this, and this is so important for those of us in small business: give the benefit of what you do. When you give the benefit of what you do, you help other people figure out how they can hire you, what your product does, etc. So when you give that benefit, You also give people the opportunity, if they're not quite sure what that is, because you've said it with a little bit of humor, to ask you a question. And then once they ask you a question, you're in a conversation. So those are my 3 self-introduction tips, though the third one has an A and a B part.
You know, a few years ago, my wife and I, we had a conversation with Boris Johnson in a theater in London. And of course, this is a man who is extremely skilled on how to work a room. He worked his way to the top doing that. And what he did, which was a real lesson to me, he asked me questions about myself in order to get a two-way conversation going so that I would talk to him and then he could talk to me. And it was very, very interesting when he began showing interest in us. We felt very much at home. We felt very accepted. We felt that we weren't talking up to Mount Olympus.
Well, you know, they've said this about so many of the leaders we know. I've heard this about Queen Elizabeth. I heard it about Maggie Thatcher. Heard someone who was the head of the association executives say that he was in England at a conference. Maggie Thatcher was there. And when she talked to you, eye contact, she did what they've said about President Reagan, President Clinton. They maintain eye contact. And this is what we all want to strive for. They made whomever they were talking to, feel like the most important person in the room. But if you're doing 20 questions and you're constantly asking someone questions, 2 things: you're giving them the floor the whole time. You're also putting them on the spot, and you're not offering anything. So what can they hook on to that they might have in common with you? The trick to being a good conversationalist is not just asking questions. It's called, and this is what the Rowan version is, and what do I say next? Bring your oar. You can paddle through any conversation. And the oar is O stands for your observations. A, yes, ask questions. And R, reveal. Those are the 3 parts of making conversation. By the way, if you only make observations, you're pontificating. If you only ask questions, you're interrogating. And if you only reveal, you're going to get yourself in trouble. So that's the conversation. And the bottom to all of that, that's the foundation is, and when you ask questions, oh, for God's sakes, listen to people's answers. That's how you know the next thing to talk about.
Now, I'm a small business owner. I'm at let's say a Rotary Club, Chamber of Commerce, whatever, some sort of function. How do I don't want to start off by making this a business conversation, but I probably want to get there. How do we do that?
Well, first of all, you were right. You don't start the conversation as a business conversation. If you're a small business person, as I am, as you are, it's all about relationships. Relationships don't happen because someone starts with, well, what do you do? How can you help me? And I have something to sell you. Pretty much in the line of some of the most offensive things. I know people that do this. They play a game with themselves of what else could I say instead of what do you do? And then they work to find out, what are you interested in? What brought you here? Oh, it's small talk. So I'm just going to do the umbrella and say, I have been a proponent and supporter of small talk even before I wrote How to Work a Room 33 years ago. Small talk is where you start with something you have in common. Why are we here? What's the venue? Did you like the food? Did you find a parking place? Oh, I see you're from this town. Bring who you are to what you do. People connect with who you are. I don't have pets, but I know people that start a conversation, they talk about their pets. They talk about their kids. They talk about favorite teams. They talk about books. They talk about movies. I did an interview with the New York Times. They wanted to have an article back in 2020 is, how do you have a conversation and not talk about COVID? So I made some stuff up, my best skill. Then I realized, and I couldn't say this to her, but I want to say this to everyone. The coronavirus, COVID, the variants, how we've dealt with it, what the issues are. This is something that's happening to us all worldwide. And if nothing else, it's the common bond. Even if we deal with it different ways, this is a conversational gift horse. Don't look it in the mouth. This is something you can start with. How have you been? I know people are saying, well, how have you been is ridiculous. How have you been? How are you? If you are a shallow, disinterested, pontificating, and I won't say the other P word, then you don't mean how are you. But if you are a person who is actually interested in people, how are you? You have to say it like you mean it. And then listen to the answer. But let's start with what we all have in common right now. I had a Zoom with a pal who I met on February 14th, 2020 at 6 a.m. in the morning at Charles de Gaulle Airport. We were all flying. She was flying to Australia. I was flying home here. And we liked each other and we stay in touch. But the conversation started because Australia had a very different COVID response. They had nothing of what we had. Now it's turning around. We're still in touch. Don't miss the opportunity to start with something that's important and then move on from there.
Probably important to avoid a lot of landmines in that conversation, though. The thing could blow up in your face if somebody gets onto politics or, the advisability or inadvisability of vaccines and all of that sort of thing. Your notion of keeping it personal, of how have you been doing, and keeping it on that level makes it safe to tread those fields.
If someone is going off on a tangent that you find irritating or something you don't want to talk about, I think it's fair to say, let them go on. And this is what I did to a friend on the phone who went off, and I just listened. And I said, with a smile in my voice, because I made sure there was a smile on my face, even though he couldn't see me, I said, oh, I hope you don't misinterpret my silence for agreement. And this guy knew me well. And he just said to me, oh my God, Susan, I would never interpret your silence for agreement. But there is a way to segue. There is a way to change the subject. And I think the most artful conversationalists, they are sultans of segue. They know how to move the conversation. And they don't get involved in anything that would make them scream and yell, etc. I was listening to a panel discussion on one of the cable with two people from opposite ends, and they were so civil. This was yesterday. Civility back in the throes of what we're seeing, that they complimented each other.
Let's say I'm not an outwardly going person, and I'm at an event, and on the ground, how do I come up to somebody and what do I say?
Here's how you do it. You go up to someone. I think that that's very hard on some people, but I learned this from a person who told me he was what he thought was medically shy. He was so shy. I think what happens when we decide that we're going to go somewhere, we can make the decision to stay in the corner. That does nothing to grow our business. That does nothing to expand our network. That does nothing to build relationships. So the idea is, and it's one of the roadblocks that I learned when I wrote How to Work a Room, and it's fear of rejection. We are afraid someone will look over our shoulder, look past us, or not be interested in talking to us. It's really making the decision. And this is what I was taught by PJ, the gentleman I interviewed who was chronically shy. And he said he decided that, like Nike, you just do it. Pick people standing alone. That's the easiest. Number one, nobody goes to an event to stand by themselves. For that, they could stay home. If you see someone standing alone, you could be assured they're uncomfortable. So if you go over to them, it's not only strategically smart, but it's kind, because the person standing alone is probably more uncomfortable than you. So pick people standing alone. And sometimes those people are not in the center of the room. They might be in the periphery. I think in these days, we have to be very careful when we go over to someone. We don't know their comfort level. We do have to have a respectable space between us, but that doesn't mean we can't extend ourselves. While some people really look for a smiling face, other people look for smiling eyes and eye contact. When you are looking at someone, they can, even if you're wearing a mask, when someone looks at you, it's as if they're saying, come on over and talk to me. Go over to people, pick people alone, introduce ourselves. And sometimes we don't say our name first. And dear Lord, we don't say our spiel first. Sometimes it's, did you have trouble parking the way I did? Or I noticed that you're eating one of the hors d'oeuvres. By the way, this is the best Rowan tip for when we really get back to the mixing and mingling. Always go to the dessert table first, because the people at the dessert table are usually so much more open and friendly than the people at the cut up vegetable table. I'm just saying. Go to the dessert table. When people are having a mini chocolate bundt cake and there's a little cheesecake in their hand, they are open. I know some people start with the bar first, but I know people who will stand in line just to talk to people. So I think it's a mindset, Doug. I think when you go to an event, when you feel prepared, and that means have your self-introduction, but the second thing is be aware of what the event is. If you know who's there, why they're there, who put the event on, what's the purpose, and you prepare yourselves by going to the website, looking people up on LinkedIn, doing your homework, you'll feel more confident. The other part is people want to meet you too. You're interesting. And I think that's the part that we forget. So start small. What brought you here? Are you a member? Are you a supporter? And it goes from there.
Just as an aside, I always go to the dessert table first because, life has its interruptions. We wouldn't want to miss the dessert thing. When I was in college, Susan, I attended a lecture by Reverend Malcolm Boyd. And one of the things that struck me, and I've always remembered it all these years, is he said that with so many people who appear to be lonely, it's unconscionable to be lonely alone. And I think that speaks exactly to what you're saying, that you need to go up there and help somebody else get through the process.
It's kind. It's such a beautiful saying that Reverend Boyd said. We think about strategic and leverage and all that other stuff. How about be kind? We want to be memorable. When we take the time out to make someone else feel welcomed and that we've paid attention to them, we'll be memorable. And this goes to our business. After a conversation, if we have paid attention to someone, made them feel welcomed and comfortable, when someone else says, hey, can you recommend, who are they going to recommend? Whose business will they recommend? The person who made them feel. The more that we can do to pay attention to the young people in our lives and the seniors in our lives and the other people in that room or Zoom, the more we'll be memorable and well thought of.
That is an example of a great segue, Susan, because so far we've talked about being in the room as though the room was physical, and you have a dessert table and you have the cheese dip over here. I am curious about working the Zoom. So I don't think it's going away. I think it's going to be here for a while, and it may actually be here forever now. Tell us a little bit about working the Zoom.
Well, the same thing goes. When you're invited, say yes, show up, don't dress like a slob. I went online to a bar mitzvah and everyone was in their living rooms or whatever. I dressed as if I was paying the proper respect. And I'm thinking, you're the aunt and uncle. What are you dressed like that for? Make sure there's a light on your face. We want to see that face, because we want to see the smile. We want to see the expression. If I say something terrible, I want to see your empathy, sympathy, have a light on your face. The second thing is use the chat function. And if you need to, and I know I needed to, I've been doing Zoom for like 10 years because of my books where I've been doing podcast guesting, but I never hosted anything until our friend Patricia said, Susan, you don't need the free, you need to pay for the professional Zoom. She knew I was having all my cousins at a Zoom brunch. And she said, they're not going to like it if it turns off after 40 minutes. So I paid for that. And then I went for some tutoring. And Zoom itself has tons of YouTube little videos. So the first thing you do is learn how to use the chat, because that's how you get to leave a message. When someone introduces themselves and says something on Zoom that you relate to, send them a note in the chat. The second thing is we have to be smart enough to check the chat, know how to use Zoom. A lot of people don't, and it's been great fodder for the comedians. We are all living in the, no, ma, unmute. No, after what you just said, please mute again. The Zoom is to be taken seriously, but it is not going away. You still have to have your own self-introduction. You still have to read the paper. You still have to know what's going on.
Well, it's interesting that you point out the Zoom thing, because I'm thinking that in the gallery view, you get to see everyone who's there all
Yeah.
at once, instead of only seeing the person you happen to be talking. And then you can actually pick them out, send them a message about something, so you can have a conversation with multiple people at the same time.
Absolutely. That's why I have you all on gallery. In fact, as a speaker, I just did a presentation and I had to extort them and say, could you please show your face? I wanted to connect with them. There is really no way that I would feel as connected without seeing someone's countenance.
Very informative, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you. You know what? I'm a former school teacher, and I've learned that my purpose, what I want to do, is make every person feel confident and comfortable and prepared to walk into any, not just an event with four walls or whatever, but to go into any venture of their life. And I think bring who they are to what they do. People are more interested in who we are. And sometimes what we do is incidental. And that even applies in our business life. So thank you. How to Work Room is still out there, still selling. And I think people are rusty. And so I think this will be very helpful to small business people, because we are now being given the option of doing things online and in groups again.
Well, this is a business skill, and a lot of people don't recognize that. The old days that I used to hear all the time, well, that's just soft skills. That's just soft skills. That's not important. Well, it isn't. Fortunately, I'm not hearing that as much anymore. This is an important business skill. If you're a vendor, if you're talking to your vendor, if you're negotiating, these things actually flow to the bottom line, and they're very important. And while enriching your life at the same time, why not?
You might find a tennis partner, you might find another movie fan, but this is what I used to say, because people would say, well, we are going to hire the sales speaker and we're going to, and I remember them saying it's a soft skill. And knowing the stats from the Stanford Shyness Clinic, I would say, really, if it's so soft, why is it so hard for so many people to do?
Good point. If people want to get in touch with you, how do they reach you?
Well, I'm very reachable. If you just plug SUSANROANE into any search engine, I will come up. And by the way, I won't look like any of the pictures because now I have white Corona hair. So they will look different. But you can get me through email, susan@susanrowan.com. But if you have a burning question about something I said that is something that you really want to have solved immediately, I'm going to do what the fourth grade teacher next door to me when I taught in San Francisco did. Give you my number, 415-461-3915. Just say that you were listening to the podcast and you had a question, and we'll come up with a solution.
Great. Thank you so much. And again, I recommend to people, Susan's books are really sort of the Bible on this skill, which is so important and so many people lack and are afraid of. And really, it's not that hard. I used to be terrified of it myself until I worked in a store and I got to where I could finally talk to people. It was great. And it changed my life, basically. So please get her books, go to her website. And as she very graciously gave us her phone number, if you got something burning, give her a call. She'll talk to you.
Why don't we mention her 2 books? I think that would be a good resource for our people.
There's more than two, but let's just do this. How to Work a Room. The other book that's available, and they're available through Audible also. The one you would also want is Secrets of Savvy Networking.
Yes.
Because too many people don't know how to network, or they're listening to people that teach them how to be transactional, which I call using. So you would want Secrets of Savvy Networking. There is one I wrote that was way before its time called Face to Face, How to Reclaim the Personal Touch in a Digital World. And I wrote that in 2008. It was published. I think that one is face to face, but you can apply all the face to face techniques to Zoom. And I think that's the thing that we need to know, is that we need to be prepared. We need to be ready. I haven't written another book, but here's what I think. If you really want the updated Roanne, follow me on Twitter at SUSANROANE or at How to Work a Room. You'll get more than you ever wanted to know.
If you're enjoying this podcast, wait till you get your hands on Doug's book, We Are Alpha Dogs, available on Amazon and wherever books, ebooks, and audiobooks are sold. Go to wearealphadogs.com for bonuses and downloads to help you and your company become legendary. And if you are especially adventurous, while you're at it, take the dog quiz and find out more about who you really are. Now, back to the Oval Table.
Well, Doug, I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about this, because I think Susan says some things that are heretical in the business world. And they're heretical because so many of the rules in the business world are throwbacks to the early 20th century. And the world has changed, and business has changed, and workers have changed, and owners have changed. So I think what she talks about is in the here and now. She's talking about how to work today. And I think perhaps the most radical thing that she mentioned was the fact that the elevator pitch is dead. They're still teaching that everywhere. They're still talking about the elevator pitch. And I must say, I agree with her on this point. Nobody wants you coming at them with your sales pitch right out of the blue. I think her suggestion that you work up a good conversational self-introduction when you shake hands, or of course, in the pandemic world, we don't shake hands, but at least when you first meet someone, I think that's a far better approach and a really important point. What do you think about that?
What she tries to implicate, or at least express to us, is that what you need to do is set up a relationship, and that things work on relationships, not on the exchange of information so much. You can't really set up a relationship if the first thing out of your mouth is, I sell cars, would you like to buy a car? Because there's no relationship there. There's no connection. There's, I don't understand you. You don't understand me. You don't even know if I drive cars. So there's no point in going to the elevator pitch type of presentation before you've had the chance to establish a connection with the person you're talking to. Sometimes what we do is we try to say, well, I want to be selective. I only want to do a few things. I don't want to be open to connections with everybody. And one of the first things she points out is that what you need to do is accept the invitation. Look on your calendar, make sure it's free, lock it down, RSVP back to them and say, I'll be there. Because what that happens is it opens up the chance that you can make what she calls an incidental connection, a chance that there is something about you and something about somebody else at these events that sets up a chance to really explore something. I was at a party once, and there was a guy there who had no relationship to me or anything I do. And I found out that he hiked the Appalachian Trail. And that opened up a great amount of conversation about, how did you do that? How did you go about doing that? What was the experience like? And it was so enriching to establish that connection with someone who had done something that I would aspire to do, but will never do. And I got to learn a lot about him through being able to make that incidental connection. If you're not at the meeting, if you're not meeting with somebody, you can't you don't have that opportunity to do that. I think that's really an important point that she makes.
Well, it goes back to the old saying, hey, the first thing you got to do is show up. And I think trade shows and conventions are a tremendous place to do this. I used to find them very intimidating. I would be at a convention or a trade show for 5 days, and I'd barely talk to a soul, which was a real waste of time and money. And nowadays, I find those things to be one of my best resources. I meet people from all over the world, all over the country. They've added so much to what I do. And I have learned that her approach, I mean, sometimes I meet these people at the bar and you sit there and you talk over a drink and a relationship is formed. And I think most people who are in business today, who have their ear to the ground, their eyes on the market, recognize that relationships are the key today. There are those who still teach that everything should be a transactional relationship. That's early 20th century thinking. And it's just not that way anymore. You form the relationship and the transactions will happen later.
One thing she says about the making the connection is that you ought to prepare for these things. You ought to get an idea of who you're going to meet at the what's the event about, who you're going to meet at the event, and the kinds of things you're likely to talk about at that event are related to the event itself, not to what you do. My experience in meeting people is that a lot of people are willing to help you. They're willing to offer suggestions and help to you, but you have to find out who they are first. So much more important to find out who they are. And to do that, you need to have some kind of a conversation goes that opens a chance for that up.
That's a really important point there. One of the reasons that she mentions, and I'll just add to it, that the main reason people hold back is fear and intimidation. I mean, here, my God, I was at a convention a couple of years ago where one of the top people in my profession was there. And I saw him eating breakfast at a table. And I just came and sat down and said, do you mind if I join you? And I got an hour's worth of advice and wisdom from one of the best people in the business, just by introducing myself, sitting down, and having a conversation over breakfast. I think these things are far more effective than the old style of doing them.
One of the best things that I got out of her conversation was, if you're going up and talking to somebody and you're just doing the same old routine, who are you, and things of that nature, it's very difficult to do it, especially if you're an introvert. So why don't you change the playing field? Why don't you change the game and change it to be a host of the event? Whether you're a host or not doesn't matter. Just go up there and be a host and try. Have you tried this? Do you like this dessert? Let me introduce you to somebody over here and be the host. It's so much easier to be the host as an introvert than it is to be the guest. Changing that mindset, to me, makes all the difference in how you go about these meetings.
Absolutely.
If I got nothing else out of it, but changing that mindset that you're going in as a host, you're going in to just greet people and have a good time with people, and forget about what you do, forget about what you sell, forget what your title is, forget all that stuff, because it really doesn't matter. That's a down the road thing. What you really want to do is talk about the benefits. If they ask you what you do, you say, well, this is the benefit that I give to people. This is how I help people.
Very important. This is the benefit that I give, not this is what I do. That's a really important point. And if everybody just realizes how generous people actually are, and they're so, particularly the ones who are at the top of their game, they're comfortable with their place. You're not a threat. They're perfectly happy to reach down and give you a leg up. They really are. It's amazing, but people are like that, and you shouldn't be afraid. You shouldn't be intimidated. You should go make a friend. It's really useful.
And people don't really care how you do whatever you do. They're really not that interested. It might not even apply to them. It's not how you do what you do that matters. It's the benefit that you bring. It's the suggestion. It's the help that you can give. And understanding that is what's important, because you really don't know how to do what you do unless you know what the problem is. Once you know what their situation is first, then you can actually suggest on how to do something. But until then, you can't.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to let you know that next week we have a very special show. I know I say that a lot. We have a very special show, but we really do. We're going to do a review, the year in review. And we're going to play you some cuts from every show that we have done, all 19, this being the 19th one. And we're going to discuss where we've been, what we've learned, and put it all together for you, because there actually is an overriding philosophy that we have followed here. And we're going to bring that to you, and you're going to be able, hopefully, if there's some early shows that we did or some shows that you've just missed and you hear a piece of that show, maybe there's something really valuable for you there and you can go back and listen to them. In the meantime, Doug, Vaughn, and I wish you the very best at this holiday time, and be sure to spend good quality time with your family and friends as much as you can. I know it's difficult at this time, but enjoy the holidays, and we'll see you next week.
If you want to grow or expand your business, why not tune into the Oval Table and listen to experts who are where you want to be?
We all hope you have a productive and inspirational week. I'm Rishi Katz, and we will see you next time at the Oval Table.